Spawn is freaking weird. There's so much to say about the character, the comics, the movie, it's insane. But I'm going to try not to ramble too much. Spawn was created by Todd McFarlane after he left Marvel and created Image Comics, along with a bunch of other guys who also all left Marvel for various reasons. Spawn, when it came out, was one of the hottest comics around, but over the years, its popularity has waned considerably to the point where most people are surprised to find out that it's still being published. Some people attribute the decline in popularity to the fact that McFarlane became increasingly distanced from it. In the beginning, he wrote and drew the comic, and then later he wrote and inked it, and then later on he only wrote it, and then eventually he didn't even write it. Ironically, the comic is considered to be considerably better today by the few people that still read it. The story has gone through a lot. The world was literally destroyed, God and Satan were trapped in a pocket dimension, then some other guy was Spawn. It just got too weird for its own good after a while. The movie, however, is based on the first few issues of the comic book, when the concepts were still fairly grounded. Michael Jai White plays Al Simmons, a CIA operative working for Jason Wynn, played by Martin Sheen. After calling out Wynn on his methods and announcing that he was quitting the agency, Wynn convinces him to do one last mission, but then he betrays and murders Simmons. Wynn is in league with a demon called the Violator, who takes the form of an obese clown played by John Leguizamo. The Violator is the main villain of the movie. He plans to destroy the world by using a virus. Simmons goes to hell because of his violent life, but he makes a deal with a greater demon known as Malbolgia. He exchanges his soul for a chance to see his wife again. He agrees to lead Hell's army against Heaven if he's brought back to life. So he's sent back to Earth. However, Malbolgia fucks him over, sending him back 5 years later, and horribly disfigured to boot. He now has powers caused by a necroplasmic symbiotic suit that engulfs his body, and basically he can do anything he puts his mind to. His power is finite, however. Once he runs out of magic, he'll be forced back to Hell to pay his debt. His wife Wanda has married his best friend Terry, and the clown tries to train him as a demonic agent called Spawn. Spawn wants revenge on Wynn for killing him, and the clown eggs him on greatly. There's also Cogliostro, an old man with mysterious powers, who also tries to take Spawn under his wing, but Spawn is interested only in revenge. Cogliostro later turns out to be a previous Spawn from the medieval era, which is interesting, because there was a character like that in the comics, but Cogliostro actually turned out to be Cain, the first biblical murderer. Yeah, I said it was weird, didn't I? Anyway, Spawn attacks Wynn but is unable to kill him, though he kills Priest, another agent who was implicated in his murder. The clown convinces Wynn to implant a device in his heart that will release the deadly virus on the world if he's killed, and then in turn eggs on Spawn to kill Wynn. After a while, Spawn gets sick of his shit and fights the Violator. Both Wynn and the Violator go after Wanda, hoping to use her to gain control over Spawn. Spawn and Cogliostro wind up opening a portal to Hell, where they battle and defeat the Violator, and escape Malbolgia. Spawn removes the device from Wynn's heart with his powers, but opts not to exact his revenge, though Wynn winds up going to prison. Spawn the movie is sort of a conundrum. When it was released, it got good reviews, but today is considered a bad movie by almost anyone you ask. To give you an idea of how far it's come in terms of reaction from critics, Roger Ebert, possibly the most respected movie critic of all time, praised the movie and gave it 3.5 stars out of 4. But today, it has a 21% rotten rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It was also a commercial success, but the planned sequel never happened. It's been stuck in development hell, and at this point will probably never get released. If they ever make another Spawn movie, I think it will probably be a reboot like everything else these days. I also have to take note of the star, Michael Jai White, who did a good job, and this was his first major starring role, but despite almost always doing a great job in movies, he hasn't had much of a career since then. Did you notice that he was in The Dark Knight? Yeah, the Joker killed Spawn. Another thing is the visual effects. Man, are they bad. But that's looking at them in 2011. Back in 1997, believe it or not, this looked good. But now it's almost painful. It heavily uses CGI, which the world was just not ready for at the time. And now it looks like a video game from a generation or two ago. One last thing I want to talk about is that there's actually two versions of the movie. A PG-13 rated version and an R-rated version. The PG-13 version was released in the theaters, and later they released the R-rated version on video and on television. Now, you'd think that the R-rated version is just uncut, but honestly, I found that that's bullshit. It seems that the only real difference is in the dialogue. There's a few curse words in the R version that aren't there in the PG-13 version, but they feel really tacked on and awkward and obviously were dubbed in. So it's obvious that they created a PG-13 movie and then dubbed in fucking shit words later on to release a supposedly uncut version. So okay, what do I think? Well, my feelings are a bit mixed. This was one of those movies that everybody liked when it came out, and then a few years later everybody just decided that it sucked all of a sudden. Kind of like Independence Day. Personally, I enjoyed it when it came out, but it really hasn't aged well. The poor visual effects, weak acting from Martin Sheen, and the over-reliance on dick jokes and fart humor really does not jive with the Hellspawn aesthetic. There's also the soundtrack, which is an embarrassment. The movie is in so many ways the worst example of 90s hip, and today it comes off extremely dated. Now that's not to say I'm jumping on the Spawn Sucks bandwagon, as there are some good qualities. The visual effects may be bad, but the artistic direction of the movie is spot on. They just didn't have the technology in place. I also think that Michael Jai White did a good job, and the film is anything but boring. And it's a fair approximation of the first few issues of the comic, which to be honest was a lot sillier than you probably remember it. So I'm going to give Spawn a 5 out of a possible 10. It's average. It's not the amazing spectacle that Ebert said it was, nor is it a piece of shit.